The system is broken. Inflation is robbing your wealth. Banks control your money. But what if there was a way out? Bitcoin isn't just an asset. It's a revolution, a decentralized, unstoppable financial system built for the people, by the people. This is the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, your front row seat to the future of money. No hype, no noise, just real Bitcoin insights from the industry's top voices. Bitcoin isn't the future. It's happening now. And if you're not paying attention, you're already behind. Don't just watch from the sidelines. Be part of the Bitcoin revolution. Subscribe now to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast. All right, we are live again. This is Craig Leblanc with the Daily Bitcoin Podcast with special guests, third, fourth time appearance. Fourth time Morgan Stuart, twice from our meetup, and then this is our second round where he's going into MicroStrategies and how you can accumulate Bitcoin and all the different ways you can acquire Bitcoin, all the different mechanisms that MicroStrategies is now deploying. So, and we've even figured out a way to get some fancy charts on here for those with reading impairment. Maybe we can do some little pictures for you and make things a little more simple. We'll start with this one. Let's see how this works. Boom. Okay.
There it is.
All right. So where did we leave off last time? Maybe do it a little. Do we have like maybe a small recap of what we did?
Yeah. So pretty much the idea behind my podcast series with you was that we take a new approach to portfolio construction in light of the new Bitcoin ecosystem. So in a world where we now see Bitcoin as a superior savings instrument, you want to start accumulating Bitcoin first. Everyone should be acquiring a position for themselves and their family in Bitcoin. And then in one of our most recent talks, I described various methods to increase your Bitcoin stack that people really haven't considered, whether that's a credit card or a debit card or even MicroStrategy stock mining. You have options out there to increase your stack of sats at any budget. So the goal is to build your base of Bitcoin first. And this is the second layer. So the second layer, once you've built a decent holding of Bitcoin, you want to add exposure, for example, to MicroStrategy. And there are a bunch of different ways to do that. And that's what I'm going to be talking with you about today, because there is a flavor for every investor out there. This is just like Baskin Robbins.
That's right. Yeah, and maybe talk about some of just for those that don't really understand, what's the purpose of having different flavors? What are some of the restrictions that are maybe simple to explain why people need a different product and maybe they can't touch just owning Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, many traditional investors don't have the time to learn about self-custody or are intimidated by it, so they want a Bitcoin proxy. MicroStrategy offers a portfolio of products that accommodate this need to, I want my certain flavor of Bitcoin, I want this much volatility, I want this much risk, and I want this much return. And so they're essentially offering you what's the right amount of risk for you, what's the right amount of return for you, what is say if you're working for an institution, what is your pension fund allowed to hold? Are they allowed to only hold fixed income? Are they only allowed to hold equities? And there is a product for everyone there. And to appeal also not just institutional investors, but retail investors as well.
That makes sense. Okay, so now I'm trying to think, did we just sufficiently recap from last time? Are we ready to take them to this next slide here? I think that's kind of what we were explaining last time a little bit about how we were able to, hold on, let me fix my mic. We were kind of able to explain that MicroStrategy is kind of like the Exxon, where they take crude oil and then they break it up into different consumable goods and services It's what kind of they're doing for this market.
Exactly. It's exactly like Standard Oil for the 21st century. Instead of it being liquid energy, it's digital energy. Instead of it being something that actually has to be transported via rail cars, we're transporting this on the Bitcoin network. So it makes sense in a world where everything is getting faster and more efficient that your capital would become faster, more efficient, and actually not only storing your value, but transmitting your value. The internet of money is here, and it's going to be in whatever flavor you need it to be.
And I love this. I love this little infographic. Where'd you get this from?
Chris Millis on Twitter makes some of the best graphics out there on MicroStrategy. And this is one of his, he describes them as the future Bitcoin bank of the world, offering you whatever type of Bitcoin product you need. I
love it. I love it how, and the oil analogy is so great, but this is more or less just a monetary system. Instead of crude oil out of the ground, you can't put crude oil into your gas tank. You can't put crude oil on your face for makeup. You can't put crude oil in a jet, but send it through Exxon, and then you can do all those things. And so I love how the analogy of making different products that are consumable to all the different people that want Bitcoin exposure.
And the reason why Standard Oil is actually valued at more than just the crude oil they hold, right, is they offer a substantial amount of value to the market by taking that crude oil and converting it into all the various different products that they make, from low energy asphalt to high energy jet fuel. There's a substantial value added in that process. You should pay a premium for that, in the same way that you do pay a premium for MicroStrategy stock above their net asset value of Bitcoin holdings. You should be paying 2x if they're going to be able to offer you that Bitcoin in any flavor you want and grow your shareholder stake, the amount of Bitcoin per diluted share every month. You should be paying a premium for that, because you can't do it yourself, and not at the rate that they are.
Right. And really, they're kind of like Standard Oil was, the only show in town. I mean, they were so far ahead of everyone else. I know they had some kind of shady practices to create their vertical and horizontal monopoly. I think it was the only both vertical and horizontal monopoly ever achieved, I think, in the history of monopolies. So they did it right. Or you could say wrong, depending on what side of the aisle you want to fall on.
And you could also say that MicroStrategy has a substantial moat, in the sense that they can protect their position as the largest Bitcoin treasury company, because what company is going to now be able to offer convertible bonds or equity or all these other products, the fixed income products, for example, that have the brand recognition? People, once they were the first company to step out there and innovate with a Bitcoin treasury policy, and that courage sets them apart in the marketplace. They're the first mover. People trust the name. And that's why institutional investors flock to their convertible bonds.
Yeah, and at some point, it's not even about trust as much as it about, if you're going to imitate them and you're a publicly traded company, you have got your work cut out for you. You can't just walk into a publicly traded company and do what you want to do. And even the founders of companies that kind of can do that have a tough time. I've seen, Elon Musk and Steve Jobs wrestle with their board. These are the founders. They have massive shares, control of shares. They're the CEO, sometimes chair of the board. And even they have a lot of trouble getting the entire company on the same page. So let's just say you're a publicly traded company, similarly positioned to MicroStrategy, and you're like, we want to do what they do. Sometimes that process can take 3 or 4 years just to get the board in line, then the company in line, and make sure that you have proper disclosure to shareholders. And he's been at this for like 4 years, and he's the founder. And so we've all measured that founders have so much more strength to kind of push a ship where they want it to, versus some of these other companies. Yeah, they're similarly positioned, but the founder stepped away a long time ago, so they just don't have the stroke that a founder has. So it's going to be challenging for anyone to follow in MicroStrategy's footsteps because there's just a slow process when it comes to moving a ship this big, changing out all these different rules and regulations that they have to abide by as a publicly traded company.
Organizations have inertia, and what are the odds that Bitcoin is so early in its life right now, and in terms of its adoption? So you could say that Bitcoin has an adoption rate right now of somewhere between 1% and 3% of the population. If that board has a certain number of people, and I bet you can bet that most people on that board don't have exposure to Bitcoin, haven't spent 100 hours learning about it. And so the companies out there that have the opportunity to become Bitcoin treasury companies, it's usually smaller companies with visionary founders who either see a massive opportunity or they have a lot to lose. MicroStrategy's case, they were looking at, they would survive only 3 or 4 more years with their cash burning on their balance sheet back in 2020, and they had to make the leap. It was an incredibly courageous thing to do, but only a company with a visionary founder and a feeling of doom, impending doom that their company would be done, can really lead the way. And so smaller companies like Semler, MetaPlanet, these really small companies that are breaking out and starting up, even smaller Bitcoin treasuries, are still groundbreaking because they're still ahead of every corporation they compete with in their respective industries.
But then again, as Bitcoin, if the effectiveness of these companies in some way is proportional to the sheer amount of Bitcoin they're able to hold in their treasuries, every day that they wait, it's getting more and more expensive for them to catch MicroStrategies because now they're having to pay, $80,000 per Bitcoin when he was buying and at a much lower pace. And so you may say that he's so far in front of the pack that at this point, unless some miraculous turnaround of like an Apple's company that's got like a massive, treasury just sitting in fiat, starts converting that as fast as they can. I think at this point, MicroStrategy is nearly uncatchable when it comes to just the sheer number of Bitcoin it's holding.
And that's why in the Bitcoin treasury company space, you could really think of MicroStrategy as there is no second best stock.
Yeah.
That's one way to think of it, because if they really can't be caught and they have a monopoly position and they're offering value in a way that no other company can, competitively at least, they are head and shoulders above every other publicly traded company. And that's why their valuation, in my opinion, is going to trend towards top 10 companies in the world in the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is, I can't think of another company that could even hold a candle to this outside of what Musk is doing with robotics and AI merging in. I don't see anything else that can possibly outpace just the steady march of Bitcoin consuming the entire asset classes of planet Earth. Outside of superhuman level intelligence being printed in Austin, I don't see much else being able to catch this train. And
you mentioned earlier, everybody was speculating on Twitter about 6 months ago. Oh, is Microsoft going to react positively or negatively to Saylor's 3-minute pitch he made to them to the board to buy Bitcoin? And they actually just turned it down. It was one of Microsoft's biggest blunders in their history. They had an opportunity to invest a portion of their absolutely massive cash reserves. You had a huge player. They had an opportunity to get Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and they messed up royally.
And this wasn't that long ago, wasn't this? Like
no, it was 6 months ago. And
wow,
Saylor made them a perfect 3-minute pitch on why, and they still voted it down. The shareholders of that company were too TradFi minded, and they're going to pay the price long term.
Yeah, and I think if you'd figure if those guys that really were on the cutting edge of developing software, you would think if any group of investors would be able to understand something like Bitcoin, they would, and yet they're not. And so it just goes to show you that sometimes this is as much of an ego test as it is an IQ test. And for those that don't understand it, they're going to pay the price. I think eventually everybody comes into this ecosystem because it's just the most efficient way to move and store capital. So the longer these guys wait, I don't know that MicroStrategy is even catchable at this point, outside of some maybe government strong arming them and telling them they have to sell their Bitcoin, breaking them up because there's some type of monopoly. I think that might be the next crisis on the hands of MicroStrategy.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
And if you go look at Ryan Cohen, his drastic move, it was speculated for months that GameStop and then CEO Ryan Cohen would go out and buy Bitcoin. And they're a zombie company running on borrowed time, somewhat similar to MicroStrategy. And they had $5 billion cash on their balance sheet, and they've already issued convertible bonds. They announced their $1.3 billion Bitcoin buy last week.
Fantastic.
They're getting ready.
Yeah, and they've got a lot of stores. I thought about them. Maybe I think I read this where they're going to put Bitcoin ATMs in each store. They're going to accept Bitcoin as payment. And they really help, push the second layer, means of exchange side of Bitcoin. Help with adoption right there.
I saw some of the rumblings on what could become of GameStop. They already have the brick and mortar locations that weren't really being, you could say they're used for selling games, but like, what's the higher value use? Is being a place where if you're new to Bitcoin and you want like a hardware wallet, or you want a small BitAxe miner, you can go there and hopefully there'll be people there, almost like, what's it called? At Best Buy. Is it the nerd team?
Oh, yeah. A little Nerds for Hire.
What is it called?
I know what you're talking about, the little black and white minivans that they show up in.
Yeah, if you had that equivalent for Bitcoin, but in store, so you need to have somebody that's Bitcoin savvy in your retail locations scattered across America, ready to talk. And this is just my own kind of fantasy about it, but maybe they rebrand as BitStop. That would be pretty cool.
Oh, there we go. And then we could start hosting Bitcoin meetups at all these locations. They could start selling hardware wallets. They could start selling seed phrase stuff. I mean, really, there is no brick and mortar that has embraced the hardware ecosystem.
No one has yet. So it's a wide open opportunity. And why not take advantage of that? They already have the retail space. And
the gamer space in general, the gamer community, I think is a ripe intellect for Bitcoin, like to understand it at least. Yeah,
that's and actually originally in the early days of Bitcoin, a lot of people were getting like rewards, or not rewards, but perks, or if you leveled up or something. I had a friend who had 2 Bitcoin from a game and he lost it back in like 2012 and back in the early days. So I think GameStop has a huge opportunity here.
That's it. Really excited about it. Go for it. We need the first brick and mortar massive chain to just roll out everything Bitcoin, swag, in person.
BitStop for the win.
Yep. And we could even have those what do they call those gaming cafes where you play board games? And I know there's several. Matter of fact, I had them on my old show where they're Bitcoin board games, similar to like
really?
And they're like, have you ever heard of the game? It's something about the rat race. Robert Kiyosaki made it. It's like a $200 board game, but it was for those of you that have read the Rich Dad Poor Dad books, you know what I'm talking about. He made a board game similar to Monopoly, but just more advanced, that really taught you how to get out of the rat race. Well, there's been a couple of game makers that I've seen at BitBlock Boom, and then a couple of them came on the show. I wish I could recall their name, but it's been so long. And they made some really elaborate board games that taught you about mining, running a node, acquiring Bitcoin at a lower rate. And it was really cool. I saw them for sale in Nashville and at BitBlock Boom. And so, instead of playing Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, you could play these Bitcoin games.
Hey, if it gets awareness up, I'd love it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's pretty cool actually. And the founders, the creators of the game were saying how it really converted a lot of people that didn't quite understand how it worked, but it was able to teach them in a very similar way, how Monopoly works. Eventually you learn that the secret to Monopoly is having somebody on your team.
Yeah.
If you want to win Monopoly, you need to have somebody on your team, preferably 2 or 3 people, and then you're going to win the game every time.
And that's why if you're in Baton Rouge, you should come to Proof of Drink.
That's right. Come to Proof of Drink, first Tuesday of every month. Baton Rouge, the Bulldog, on Perkins Road. The greatest Bitcoiners in Louisiana will be there. And if you happen to miss them there, come to the New Orleans one on Thursday. You'll see guys from Homa, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette coming to both of those monthly Bitcoin meetups. Don't miss it if you're in town. All right, so we're ready for the next
next step here.
Let's see. All right, which one are we going here?
Do you have the oil analogy?
Let's see.
It's gonna be the next one. No, the next one down. Keep going.
Let's see. That one?
No, it's so there we go.
Okay.
So using this model, we have the comparison that we were talking about earlier. And so this is a prime opportunity to talk to the audience about the different product offerings of strategy. So to start at the bottom, the lowest volatility product, as in the lowest overall risk product, would be the dividend product. So this is as of very recently, MicroStrategy introduced the STRIFE. It's a 10% Series A perpetual preferred stock. So what they do is they offer you a 10% annual cumulative dividend payable quarterly in cash, straight cash, with unpaid dividends compounding at up to 18% annually. It has no equity conversion option. So STRIFE targets income-focused investors, providing a stable yield with less volatility than MicroStrategy stock. So this is the lowest volatility product on offer, and it's brand new on the market. And limited exchanges offer it right now, but I think it'll become more popular in the future. 10% annual dividend is pretty good.
That's nice. Yeah, and then that's something that I know we had talked about it at our Bitcoin meetup a couple of days ago. But a lot of the real estate portfolio people, their biggest argument is, I need cash flow. This is how I feed my family. I know there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of landlord issues dealing with renters. Mother Nature's constantly tearing my stuff apart, burning it down, blowing it over, flooding it, kind of stuff. People are taxing it. But this is my monthly income. And so they don't want to go to Bitcoin because it doesn't have a cash flow mechanism to it. And at least that's what's kind of holding them back in their head. But this would kind of solve that as an issue if you can get, this dividend payouts.
And it's not offered on all major exchanges yet, but I think it will be in the future. And I agree with your idea about it replacing real estate. The idea is, you think about it, you're going to go out and take $150,000 to $200,000, probably a $200,000 loan on a rental property, right? You're going to be getting rent once a month, and if you're a busier person, you're going to be paying 10% in management fees to somebody else to run it for you, and you have all the cost of upkeep, insurance, and you just have so much real world cost and friction. You want a product that can give you an income. And without the real world friction, people really have to, a lot of people just assume that they can only do real estate. Well, that's not really the case anymore. There are more and more products being offered every day that give you a chance to monetize in the short to medium term here with these income products, Bitcoin. Right. So that's the first offering I wanted to mention. So if you look on our graphic we have up here, we're starting on the very right at dividends. Now we're moving on to convertible bonds. So the convertible bonds, they're commonly used by larger institutions. Right now, you can't buy them unless you buy them in an ETF as a retail investor. But they're debt securities that can be converted to MicroStrategy common stock at a predetermined future price. So it's usually a premium of 30, 40, 50% over the current stock price. So you're giving MicroStrategy the $1,000 for the bond. It's a 0% coupon payment. However, you get your money back in full at the end of the term, and you get the conversion rate, which everybody's going for that conversion. Everybody wants to get the stock price to the conversion price so they can trade in their convertible bond for the common stock. And that's the common stock where all the juicy returns are.
Right.
So you have Bitcoin exposure to the potential upside of converting that debt into equity.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I just love the comparison, how we're comparing all these different, products that are usable by an industry versus just getting oil out of the ground. I mean, what do you do with it if you don't have the refining capacity? And maybe I love even the comparison of the infrastructure. If you think of maybe it's because, we're both in Baton Rouge. You can go to North Baton Rouge and see, the largest oil refinery in America, I think, or used to be. At one point, it was the largest or second largest in the hemisphere. Baton Rouge has a massive oil refinery. Exxon does. And when you just see the infrastructure that it takes to take an oil tanker of oil and break it down into all its components and then ship it out, it's just a massive, massive undertaking. If you think about all the things that MicroStrategy is to be able to do that, it really takes a lot of infrastructure and effort on their behalf, and really a lot of knowledge and know-how about how all this industry works.
Yeah, and it's you're giving people so many more options that they otherwise didn't have. You're creating new customers that don't want to deal with the hassle of hardware wallets, exposure to the best asset in the world. So moving on from the convertible bonds, I wanted to mention the preferred stock. So you have something called STRK, STRK. It's an 8% Series A perpetual strike preferred stock. So STRK features an 8% annual dividend notes. It's lower than the fixed income we talked about earlier, payable quarterly in cash or common stock as decided on by the board. And it has a $100 liquidation preference and is convertible into common stock at a rate of 10 shares of STRK to 1 share of common stock. So at $1,000 per share, you get common stock. And so it offers you lower volatility than MicroStrategy, but you have a yield, a consistent perpetual dividend of 8% per year, and you have the potential to convert into equity later on. So it's kind of like trying to give you the best of both worlds.
Yeah. Love it. All right. And so then what's next on the list? Is that
next on the list would just be the MicroStrategy common stock. So it just gives you direct exposure it's an indirect exposure to Bitcoin, heavily tied to MicroStrategy's Bitcoin holdings, which is the majority of their market cap. And it appeals to traditional investors like tech investors who might be buying QQQ or Tesla or Microsoft, and they want to invest through a standard brokerage account rather than buying Bitcoin. So for some people, they don't hold any Bitcoin, they just buy MicroStrategy stock.
Yeah. And then this is where indexes can even come in and almost be required to hold this, because as it goes into like the, Fortune 500, you're going to be I think at that
S&P
point,
500 inclusion is going to be huge.
Yeah. And it's definitely coming because it's got the market cap. to do so. I think I don't know what they're waiting on aside from maybe back-to-back profitable quarters or something like that.
Yeah, they needed 4 quarters of positive earnings and the right market cap to be included.
Yeah. And I think they have. I know they've got the market cap size. They should have that by now.
It's been the earnings. So it's the new FASB rule that went into effect, stating that they can now report at fair value. That's going to be the kicker that'll get them into the earnings,
right?
Each quarter earnings that they need.
Yeah, and I think at that time, I remember we were talking about that last year. That this is basically Michael Saylor gaming the system, because the more value, the more market cap that he gets, he's able to issue more debt on that, and then buy more Bitcoin, which increases the market cap, which means he can issue more debt, which means he can buy more Bitcoin, and it's just a cycle that he could literally go up and just chew up all the different, just the whole value, capture more and more percentage of the Fortune 500. And no one else is really tied to something that's just tearing through the whole ecosystem like Bitcoin is. And so as Bitcoin succeeds, he's just a multiplier of that.
Do you want to pull up the black hole?
Let's see. Yes. All right. All right. That's going to be this one, the black hole. This is what's coming. Brace yourself.
That is what's coming right there.
So for those of you that don't know, this is a like an imitation of how a black hole bends light around it. So if you've ever seen like let's say our star becomes the black hole, the sun becomes a black hole. Every planet, Jupiter, Mars, Earth, it's all kind of going to be pulled into the center of it. And so at that point, people fighting over, well, should I be in Microsoft or Amazon is irrelevant. Everything's getting sucked into the center.
There is no second best.
That's right.
You're watching it.
Yeah.
You're watching it in real time.
Yeah, you are watching this in real time. And I really don't think there's anything stopping it as long as Michael Saylor just keeps the ship doing what it's doing. It really is a very simple play. Just wash, rinse, and repeat. Just hold. And by doing that alone, everything else is now having to outcompete something that's growing at 65% a year on year, just consuming all advancements in technology are just coming its way. And I really think even that, and this might be a little off topic, but I even think AI chooses this as the money they want to use to transact value when you need something that's kind of humanless. So, humans are choosing which asset to buy, but I think when computers start to choose the asset, I think they're just going to go straight for the Bitcoin, my opinion.
Yeah, they won't have any issues choosing the best option for them.
Well, they don't have the ego, or they don't have a lack of understanding. Whereas, the human believes, but the AI kind of knows. And so if it has access to the same knowledge that we have, and it might take us 7 or 8 years to check our ego, kill all our heroes kind of stuff, and really just see Bitcoin for what it is. But sometimes it's like a 6 or 7 year process. I can't imagine AI taking that long to draw the same conclusion.
No, it's going to be fast.
Yeah.
It's going to be so fast.
Right. Great one. All right. Any other comments on this one before we move on?
No, we can go back to our standard oil model here.
Let's see. This one. This one right here.
There you go. And so after you have the equity, the common stock that I just described was the most common product. So retail investors, you can get this on every exchange. So the MicroStrategy is the most common product they offer, the common stock. So after the common stock, if you want even more volatility, there are leverage ETFs out there called MSTU and MSTX that offer double the daily returns. However, they are incredibly risky, and they're really meant for short-term trading. So you're trading because if you believe you have news that MicroStrategy is going to jump 10% tomorrow and you're a day trader, these products might make sense for you, but it's not safe to hold those long term. Not financial advice, but it doesn't really work out well for holding those long term. They're meant to be short term directional vehicles.
Yeah.
If you want to make your big bet that MicroStrategy is going up 10% tomorrow, sure, but you don't want to hold it for a whole year or two.
Right. Yeah, and my recommendation is, if you can do long-term store of value, just buy the underlying asset, hold Bitcoin in cold storage. Make sure you take custody of your Bitcoin. It's not your Bitcoin if you don't have the keys. Take it off exchange. But if you're kind of restricted by a lot of these other, let's say you're just managing funds for a group of people or for like a pension fund, and you don't have the option. That a lot of times you don't have that option. So this comes in very handy for you to have some Bitcoin price exposure.
Yeah, so you got lots of flavors out there, and moving back up on our schedule here, we had options. So for those people that are advanced options traders, if you feel so inclined, you can buy options on MicroStrategy. So a lot of people like writing covered calls as an income strategy. Some people are ballsy enough to put puts on MicroStrategy. Hard to believe, but it happens. But since MicroStrategy is so volatile, it's the most volatile stocks on the market right now. There is a huge options market out there. So,
yeah, it's and I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is the money that's in Bitcoin are small markets compared to like if you look at the buckets that are currently in Bitcoin, the buckets of money. Prior to the ETFs, the ETFs came in and were just stroking massive checks. Like these were pension funds coming in. These were a lot of people that couldn't hold it any other way. These were 401ks coming in, big chunks of long storage money. But when you talk about options and real estate and bond markets, these aren't like a couple $1 trillion market. These are like 50 and 100 and 250 $1 trillion buckets of money. And so I don't know how big is the options. I mean, I know how big real estate is. I think that's globally is 250 trillion. Bonds I thought was like 100 trillion. What's
bonds are something like 300 trillion a year.
Oh, well, see, there you go. So, I mean, 1% of that is $3 trillion, and that's bigger than the entire market cap of Bitcoin.
Saylor actually came out saying last week that he wants 1% of the bond market.
Yeah. Well, that would do something special for those MicroStrategy shareholders.
It would.
That would do something crazy. Okay. Any other things on options?
That was it for options.
Okay.
So as we've talked about, you've worked your way up from least risky to most risky. I don't really spend too much time on those leverage ETFs or options just because personally it's too much risk for me to even go anywhere near that.
Yeah. All right. We're let's see. I think are we done with this slide?
Yeah.
Let's see. What's our next one? Captain Mo. This one?
If you go down, there we go.
That one?
That's a good one. So the point across my several podcasts with you so far has been that every person out there needs to build a base of Bitcoin. So this is your true savings. That's the way to think about it. Bitcoin is the foundation for your financial future. As a savings vehicle, you want a solid base of Bitcoin. That's different for everyone. Nobody is going to tell you you absolutely need this amount of Bitcoin compared to other assets. But everybody who can buy some true Bitcoin and hold it in self-custody should. And this should the first step you take. And then you can layer risk on top of that, depending on your own needs. So for example, I'm a younger person. I like the idea of a growth stock like MicroStrategy. But if you're an older person, you might like an ETF like BMAX that invest in a portfolio of convertible bonds of Bitcoin treasury companies. So there are safer options. So what I'm saying is there's two routes here. You're building a new portfolio in the Bitcoin ecosystem where Bitcoin is always your base, and then you have a large chunk in the middle where you can add in whether you want growth income or just consistent dividends over time. Right. And at the very top, you'd have like a smaller portion of, my favorite miner or my favorite company like Fold. Like any Bitcoin related company with a Bitcoin treasury, you can go cherry pick a few of those, or you can buy an ETF called Own B and buy the basket.
Right.
So this was just my own thinking on what are some options when it comes to building a portfolio where you're working from. I always have a base of Bitcoin. I find the right products that fit my own needs in the middle, and then I put a sprinkling of smaller companies that are going to be building the applications and the retail side of Bitcoin out in the world on top.
Right.
Small allocation.
Right. Now also just want to let everybody know, as nice as these are and as powerful as some of these mechanisms are, similar to how if you don't have a gas station in your neck of the jungle and you've got a car, it doesn't matter that you got a car that runs on gas if Exxon can't get the refined gasoline to your local gas station because there is no gas station. So a lot of countries are cut off from all the above. So they have to kind of use, they're able to do Bitcoin or Lightning rails or stuff like that. But some of them legally are not even allowed to buy, some of these. You have to be
American stocks.
Yeah. You have to be U.S. citizen or, but a lot of the 64 dollarized nations that are super struggling to be banked at all. This is kind of for those that live inside of the United States, maybe even Europe, or have access to some of these different capital markets.
And that's why it's always easy to recommend Bitcoin first.
Right.
So whenever we had our first talk, Bitcoin as savings, it should be clear to those that do even a reasonable amount of research that this is savings that you can actually rely on better than any fiat currency in the long term.
Right. Right. All right. Done with that one?
Done.
All right. What's our next one? Let's see. Scrolling. Did that one. How about these two?
So I can go back to that Moat right there. MicroStrategy Moat. Yep.
Oh yeah.
This is what we were talking about earlier without looking at this. So MicroStrategy can't be touched because they have the most widely known brand. They are truly in a monopoly position. They hold 10x what Mara holds on their balance sheet in Bitcoin, 500,000+ compared to 45,000. They have a visionary founder. They have lots of optionality, and they're volatile. So.
Yeah. And just to talk about the visionary founder, a lot of times the captain of the ship is night and day difference because, when you are plodding through uncharted territory, the crew can get pretty sketchy if the only one that really understands it is the captain. There needs to be deep trust. There needs to be even some real power that he has, because look what happened to Jack Dorsey when he lost a lot of his voting rights and power. It got to where, Twitter was just out of control, like out of his control. It got to where even the founder just lost control of his own company because he just had too few shares, had too little influence. And even though he is now, in my opinion, I think he's a great Bitcoiner and I think would have done something to shift Twitter towards some type of Bitcoin play, like he did with was it Cash App and Square. So and now he's nonstop Bitcoin, that he's claimed he's going to dedicate the rest of his life to this. But it goes to show that you can't just be a visionary. You have to be a visionary in power with sufficient control and sufficient sway over all the other stakeholders inside your company. And so even if somebody had the other four on this list, but didn't have a Michael Saylor at the helm of the ship, it's useless. You really have to have all of these in unison to be able to follow them.
Without the conviction of a visionary, who's gonna keep the group steady whenever things get really tumultuous? I mean, that's the volatility out there will scare out all the TradFi kind of oriented people. So unless you're steeped in Bitcoin, you're not going to have the courage to make it through. You get scared out of your position with your lettuce hands.
That's right. These lettuce hands. Now, talk about brand recognition for a second. When I hear a lot of people coming in from this altcoin or this new smart chain or this new meme coin or the utility to tokenize this and that, it's like, man, I don't think people realize how huge just brand recognition is when it comes to scale. It's that you might be able to convince a few number go up people to come play at the blackjack table. But when you're trying to get real money in, that's not just practically gambling money or high risk money, or I just want to get rich quick kind of scheme, you're not going to get the big checkbooks to show up at scale, anything above. I mean, you'll see some of these altcoins, they'll get to maybe $1 billion, a couple hundred million, maybe even 10, 20, 50 billion. But then they really start to struggle to get outside of this high risk capital population. They'll certainly never get pension funds and nation states and sovereign wealth funds and the bond market. Like they're not, they're cut off as far as a moat that cuts you off, just the sheer brand recognition, much less regulatory clarity of that kind of stuff. And that's where people put so much emphasis on the use case. I'm like, man, the use case is not getting you over those 12 moats that I just mentioned.
Yeah. And the brand recognition is what people that might not be familiar with Bitcoin or with cryptocurrency, but if you give them Bitcoin, they should trust it more. I mean, it's the Coca-Cola of cryptocurrency. Right. Like there is no second best, and there's nothing even remotely close.
Yeah.
So MicroStrategy, in the same way, by getting so far ahead of their competition, really has become memeable. You see how much content's out there with Michael Saylor, and he's in memes for a reason. His conviction, his passion about the topic, people have memed him constantly on Twitter. Like my feed is full of Saylor memes, and they're all great. So people will recognize Saylor, and they associate that with MicroStrategy, much like I think he's the Steve Jobs of our day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of people don't recognize that most capital is risk averse. I mean, there's a reason why people are at a tune of $250 trillion globally are in real estate, because you have those slogans. Well, they're not making any more, not printing any more land. And, you can, man's not a man unless you got land, all these different slogans that are just land has a pretty solid brand. Real estate has a solid brand that's been here for pretty much since the beginning of time. And, so if Bitcoin is having trouble converting real estate investors because it's a shaky investment, then everyone else is infinitesimally small compared to converting that group of people that are really not looking for a risky asset. They're just looking to not lose what they had. Most money out there, I would say, in the world is not trying to multiply itself. It's just trying not to be lost.
Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine that said there's two types of investors that he sees. He says there's the ones that made the money, and there's the ones that inherited the money. And the ones that made the money, there's a sense that they could make it back. But the ones that inherited it, they don't know how to replace it if they lose it. So their one set of instructions is, I don't care if I make money, just don't lose it.
That's your only instruction. And so then these portfolio managers are sticking it in things that just are just safe bets.
And that's why these some of the products that I described earlier, I know I had somewhat of a dry explanation of them, but
yeah,
what's not dry is how appealing they are to people that just want to keep their money. Convertible bonds, fixed income, and those kind of interest rates I mentioned, 8% on a perpetual stock, you will get paid 8% consistently forever.
Yeah.
And 10%. I mean, 10% a year is pretty good on the fixed income. I'm like, a lot of people will go buy, I hate to say it, treasury bonds, making a lot less than that.
Right.
So he's offering people investors such compelling products, and that brand recognition is really going to kick in as these products become more and more available through, for example, ETF exposure. So the convertible bonds aren't available to retail investors, but they'll be packaged up in the BMAX convertible bond ETF for Bitcoin related companies. So like you'll be able to buy it as an ETF, and you know that portfolio managers are going to start recommending these products as they consistently outperform their peers.
Yeah.
Just in the same way that portfolio managers, for all the normies out there that haven't gotten cold self-custody sorted out or are too intimidated by it, they just went and bought the ETFs.
Yeah.
The Bitcoin ETFs.
Let's talk a little bit about this monopoly thing. I think a lot of people just kind of glaze right over that monopoly, the monopoly word, the monopoly term. What's it like to go up against a monopoly? What's it like to market against a monopoly? What's it like to try to compete for the brain power that's in a monopoly? How a monopoly can just come in and buy your idea. I think we've seen monopolies just see competitors and they just buy them. They just consume them. They start like stockpiling the brain trust inside their industry. They start buying land all around. And so a monopoly is most of the time the reason you can't compete with it is because there's no attack vector on a monopoly. If it owns, and this was, maybe we can go back to the Standard Oil monopoly. They owned everything from the land that the oil was on to and they made, they own the land, they own the pipelines, they own the refineries, and they own the gas stations. So there was no part of the entire chain they didn't own. And then it got to a point to where they owned every gas station and every refinery, so that you just, at some point, they could just charge whatever they wanted. And good luck trying to outpace them or outstrong arm them or outspin them. And so monopolies are just insanely hard to unseat. And I think that's why we see, who's competing with Amazon, who's competing with Google, who's competing with Airbnb, who's competing with Tesla, who's competing. And you just go through and just see monopolies just winner take most. And I think in this one, it's not just winner take most, it's like literally winner take all.
Winner take all, yeah.
In this category.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw this, it was a couple weeks ago. Sailor was posting that at the headquarters for Strategy up in Virginia, that they were opening up a floor for innovators in the Bitcoin space to come co-work there. Some sort of a Bitcoin village kind of idea where you bring in people that are innovating in that space, and they were offering spaces for people to come apply. And so you can go work in the same area with people that are doing the same thing you're doing and innovate together.
Yeah. And literally they'll fund you. It's not just a free co-working place. If my understanding is correct, and actually when I went to Bitcoin, Nashville has a little BitDev meeting that meets monthly. And I was at the last one and they mentioned this. And if I heard them correctly, not only if you're working as a Bitcoin developer building some type of lightning payment or something that's just strengthening and helping the Bitcoin ecosystem, especially if it's open source, not only do you have a free place to work, but they'll literally help fund you because anything strengthening the Bitcoin network in any capacity it's of interest to all Bitcoiners. Like there's not a Bitcoiner out there who's not rooting for you to succeed if you're working on something for the whole network. And so a lot of these BitDev hubs, Nashville, Austin, New York, LA, Sacramento, San Francisco just opened up another one, I heard.
Yeah.
An old one that was kind of closed, and now they reopened it back up. But now in Washington, D.C., on a floor that MicroStrategy, I think, owns the whole building. They're just converting an entire floor just for this type of activity to be going on. So if you want to go live in D.C. and be in that headquarters working on something for Bitcoin, definitely apply.
Yeah, the like you were talking about Jack Dorsey earlier, but you're also talking about the investment side of it. Random tangent here about Dorsey developing the medium of exchange and payments layer. It was in the news today that Square is working on integrating Bitcoin payments into their, I think it's like a payment system, like with, is it where you swipe and it's on top of your iPhone with Square, where it's a payment system for vendors, right? So have you heard of that? Like,
I have not. I haven't been keeping up with that part of Second Layer. I've been so busy trying to get this thing off the ground.
Well, Square is just common with like credit cards, like normal vendors being able to use it, but integrating Bitcoin into the vendors who are already using it.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, so it'll allow people to actually spend Bitcoin anywhere that somebody uses a Square for payments.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how all the tech works, but I think at some point you can just use Bitcoin as a base layer inside the system, and the people at the counter buying and selling stuff don't even realize they're using Bitcoin, much like the ACH system that we're using, or that banks use to settle between each other, or the SWIFT system rather. If they change that system, as long as my dollars goes through, I don't really know the underlying technology they're using to settle up payments between each other. And I think in the same way that as people start to settle in Bitcoin on base layers, the consumer doesn't even really need to be aware of it. I mean, I don't know how Visas settle payments. I'm not in tech, so I don't understand how it works. But you know, if Bitcoin works for settlement for major corporations, I'm assuming they're just going to start using it. All right. So how about this volatility thing? Explain that a little bit.
You know, volatility is vitality, as Saylor says. So living things tend to be volatile. You know, the idea that constant movement and not stagnation. So you could really think of the dollar as very stagnant. Bitcoin's volatile, but it also has quite a bit of life in it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think you want, like you said, you want volatility, because that's, you know, and Bitcoin is volatile upwards volatility.
From weaker hands to stronger hands.
That's right.
Every day.
Actually, this is one of our conversations we had at the New Orleans Bitcoin meetup. They were talking about operational security and people getting hacked and getting, you know, not having, you know, falling for some of these scams. But I look at as kind of our educational department, all the scammers and hackers. They're constantly teaching us to strengthen our operational security. And you get burned, you lose your Bitcoin. Hopefully you don't make that mistake twice, and now you become stronger hands. And I can tell you, those scammers, God bless them, they're working hard for their money. If they're trying to scam Bitcoiners out of money and they're successful, I think my hat's off to them. But I'm hoping Grandma learns her lesson. It's usually not Grandma. Most of them grandmas are pretty savvy when it comes to their investments. Shout out to, oh my gosh, I can't remember her name. I think her name was Estelle in Lafayette. This lady must have been at least close to her 80s, and she was there with her grandson. They got into Bitcoin together. She got her little grandson into it. Matter of fact, I think you might have been at that meeting. It was the one that
That's awesome.
I think what's your lady's name?
Oh, Danielle?
Yeah, I think she
Danielle
came.
was
there. Yeah. I think that elderly lady was there. And I think our story went 5 or 6 years ago. She kind of grabbed her grandson, who they kind of did little investments together, and they got into Bitcoin. Can you imagine getting into Bitcoin with your 75
grandma? That's incredible.
That's a cool story. Anyway,
fun fact: I orange pilled my cousin's mother, who is like an adopted grandmother for me. So getting her into Bitcoin slowly but surely.
Yeah. Well, look,
exciting.
if ever I'm allowed to speak at some major Bitcoin meetup, my prediction might be 5 or 6 years from now is going to be, where are all my Parks and Rec people? And I'm hoping to hear a very motivated crowd of Bitcoiners that came through my Parks and Rec podcast, because that's a growing number of people in municipal government running our park systems of America that I'm bringing them into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I don't know any other way that a Parks and Rec person might find their way into Bitcoin, but hopefully they're coming in through my other podcast that I help run.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Optionality. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, whenever you have such a strong monopoly and you have the brand recognition, you have options that other companies don't. So it's like, how do I make real the fact that I'm the most powerful player in this game? You have available options, available funding, for example, options that other companies without such strong brand recognition and a monopoly wouldn't have. You have opportunities available to you as MicroStrategy that I promise you Mara's not going to get, Riot's not going to get.
Yeah.
The companies with smaller Bitcoin treasuries just have no chance of getting those kind of opportunities that MicroStrategy can.
Yeah.
MicroStrategy has a decent chance of being included in our country's sovereign wealth fund, for example. Do you think that the same will be the case for Semler? Probably not.
Yeah, and I think that's where, regulatory clarity around Bitcoin really keeps a lot of other competitors to actual Bitcoin in the cryptocurrency blockchain ecosystem. They just don't have the optionality that Bitcoin, the underlying asset under MicroStrategy, has, and they'll never get it because, I don't know what advantage you could claim to have over Bitcoin that you didn't at the same time trade off something that kills the deal. And I think that's where a lot of people outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem, say just in crypto or some meme coin or something, don't realize that what they had to trade for this supposed advantage over Bitcoin was the thing that killed their ability to catch it. That Bitcoin, with everything, there's trade-offs. And I can't remember. It was one of these podcasts that I watched that they have people that go in and try to find inefficiencies and start moving levers around and make companies more efficient. And so one of these kind of gurus that does this for major companies came into the Bitcoin ecosystem to try to find ways to make it a little bit better. And he was like, in all my years, I've never come across something like this that I have really there's really no way to improve upon this. Certainly we could make it a little more secure, but we traded decentralization or we traded usability. And so when you look at all the trade-offs considered, Bitcoin is probably the most balanced engineered money we've ever gotten our hands on.
Yeah, what you just described was the trilemma. So I just sent you a picture in your messages here, if you want to pull it up.
Yep. Let's see.
The trilemma. So you have to always choose between three factors: scalability, decentralization, and security. Every single one of those altcoins has to seriously handicap one of those in order to make it work.
Right. So essentially what he's saying is, let's take a good example like Monero, probably the most secure thing out there, but it can't scale because it's not sufficiently decentralized.
Yeah.
So
that's the right way to think about it.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin's the most secure and the most decentralized, but it struggles with scalability.
Yeah. And so like you said, it's that they're being stronger in one makes you weaker in the other. So finding that balanced approach. And then at some point you're like, well, I look at it this. Here's a great analogy. Let's say there's this competition. We have this thing called a wheel, and we don't quite know what shape it should be in. And so you just have this massive competition, and everybody starts drawing, a square. Some people draw something like that maybe has 6 sides, and then finally somebody just comes up with something that's oblong, and then something that's just a perfect circle. And as we start testing these, that the perfect form factor that we found for the wheel, the perfect shape, was the circle. And at some point you sit back and say, there's really no way to improve upon that. every shift we've made causes a problem on the other side. And so in a similar way, as a form factor, Bitcoin is just what a lot of people call it. It's perfection, just like a mathematical perfection, and certainly perfection can be achieved. It's rare and it's hard, but I mean, you can look at certain math formulas and say, "Man, that's fairly perfect." How do we improve upon that? Maybe we can build upon it, but improving upon it is this super challenging, nearly impossible.
Yeah, that could be a whole separate 3 podcasts right there.
Yeah. Right.
But I love the wheel analogy.
Yeah.
You don't need a second generation wheel.
Right. You can come up with different use cases for the wheel, but trying to improve upon the circle as being the form factor is the challenge there. The perfect circle, kind of hard to beat. And I think you find a lot of laws in physics, like the laws of physics are pretty much the law. Everything else is a suggestion. And I think a lot of the laws of cryptography and the laws of physics and the laws, in algebra, certain mathematics, they're pretty stable. And I think they can be discovered. But you could say Bitcoin's always been here. It just was discovered recently. Just like algebra's always been here. It's just kind of been discovered by man. All right. Anything else on this one?
That's it.
Okay. I think now we done blew past the 1 hour mark. So we're well past our commitment of 1 hour of Bitcoin content on 9 p.m. We're at 9:17. So that made up for us starting a little bit later. You want to give us a teaser on what our next Thursday show is? Are we still good for next Thursday? Same time, same place?
Yeah, we're still good for next Thursday. So if you go back to that triangle I had for you in the previous photo, I think it's the one above that.
This one?
Yeah. So I was going to go ahead and discuss the middle of the triangle more. Tonight, I wanted to really just talk about MicroStrategy. Mm-hmm. I'll talk more about MSTY and Strike and BMAX. These are all different products, but I wanted to talk about those, and on top of talking about the applications layer at the top that will be built on the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Love it.
So Bitcoin is the roots, or as the foundation, MicroStrategy as your ground level, and then the buildings are the applications, the own B kind of companies, Bitcoin treasury companies with a real future, GameStop being one of them now.
Yeah. Or you could say that Bitcoin's not the bottom of the pyramid. It's the blue columns wrapped in some odd copper thing going kilometers into the earth part of the pyramid.
Yeah, sorry, TradFi people. You just discovered the giant columns underneath the pyramid. They're called Bitcoin.
They're called Bitcoin. Not just the base layer, the foundation, deep to the bedrock foundation.
It was always there, Mr. Financial Planner.
Right. Fantastic. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Appreciate this. I love having a guest host with me regularly on Thursdays. Maybe we keep this as a regular Thursday thing.
I'm all for it.
If you're open to it. And I've got some other guests I need to get on here. I'm still just trying to get everything organized on the production end, since I'm producing 2 podcasts. Shout out to all my Parks and Rec people that are here. Of course, if there's any Bitcoiners want to learn more about the world of parks and recreation, it's a great career that I have me questioning my career path now that I've kind of already made it through mostly. But love Parks and Rec, and I love making podcasts for both of these topics that are near and dear to my heart. And appreciate you, Morgan, for coming help me host this today.
Thanks so much for having me on, Craig. Looking forward to the next one.
All right, man. Take care.
Have a great night.
All right. All right. Let's see. I am going to have to put the let's see, take that off, and I got to put the little close. Let's see, media assets. Give me 1 second. All right, so this is our outro for...
Welcome to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, where knowledge...
Sorry, that wasn't supposed to happen just yet. Psych. All right, so I will be here. We're making Bitcoin content 5 days a week, Sunday through Thursday. Craig Leblanc with the Bitcoin Daily Podcast. Thursdays now looks like it's going to be me and Morgan Stuart analyzing whatever we can analyze. I really kind of let him take the lead on that, so I appreciate all the efforts he's doing. Thank you so much for, Chris doing a lot of great work on the back end, helping me post these videos, edit them, put intros and all that kind of stuff. And he even made this little video here. So I really appreciate that. Love you guys. Y'all keep stacking sats, be humble, and, keep learning. Keep learning. The best thing you can do for your Bitcoin is to learn. Most of Bitcoin is up here. It's in your head. Because if you get some lettuce hands like Germany and sell it all, shame on you. Don't sell your Bitcoin. Love you guys. Bye.
Welcome to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, where knowledge meets financial freedom. We're here to break down the world of Bitcoin. No fluff, no hype, just real talk about how this digital asset is reshaping the future of money. Inflation is stealing your purchasing power, but what if there was a way to fight back? Enter Bitcoin, the digital currency that empowers you to take control of your wealth. Ever wondered why your money doesn't stretch as far as it used to? At the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, we educate, inform, and inspire. From expert interviews to breaking news, we bring you everything you need to stay ahead in the Bitcoin community. Market updates, expert insights, real-world use cases, and practical tips to navigate the Bitcoin economy. So whether you're a seasoned Bitcoin investor or just getting started, this is your daily dose of Bitcoin wisdom. Don't miss out. Subscribe now, hit that bell icon, and let's break free from the chains of inflation, one Bitcoin at a time. The Daily Bitcoin Podcast, your gateway to financial freedom.